WOAI and iHeartMedia.
Welcome. This is Sidebar. Sidebar, a frank discussion on the law, life, and liberty. Sponsored by the LaHood Norton Law Group. And now, your objection sustained. Your hosts, Karen Klaus and former Bexar County District Attorney, Nico LaHood.
1200 WOAI. This is Sidebar with former Bexar County DA Nico LaHood, trial lawyer, managing partner of the LaHood Norton Law Group, and George Araujo, scholar, former chemist, pharmaceutical researcher, and director. Today, I'm in order. I've got my sheet in front of me, and I know that since I have everything prepared, that we probably won't get to the topics that I want. Well, we are going to discuss today, I hope, the Energy Department's admission, and the FBI, I believe, that the cause of COVID-19 might have been a lab leak. Wait, is that news? People have been talking about that for about 3 years. And also, if we could just touch on the Murdaugh trial, because it came to a very quick conclusion on Friday.
Well, those are both good topics, and they'll probably take up the whole show. There's a lot more to talk about than that. I know people were asking about, DeSantis and running and Nikki Haley and the presidential stuff, but these two topics right here will definitely take up some time. Look, the Department of Energy and the FBI, I think it's interesting, and I look for motive. I wonder why the timing of both of these agencies making this claim. I mean, and the level of evidence that they moderate or low confidence, people don't understand the intel agency. It means something. That's not a negative statement. They went from no confidence, no, zero, you're nuts, you're a conspiracy theorist. I'm not saying those departments said that, but in general, to saying low confidence or medium confidence, I mean, those are significant claims by two agencies of our government that in the past had not made that claim. Or actually, and then the narrative out there. We got to talk about the media narrative, Karen and Georgia. I mean, also because you were called a quack. I was yesterday, just because I was trying to catch up from a week. I was looking at stories on CNN, MSNBC, on NBC. Everyone talking about this now. And now everybody's quote unquote on board. And it's not, to me, it's not about a side. It's about just follow the truth wherever it leads you. Why can't we do that? But we're so tribal. Yeah, we've talked about that on the show before, that we're just going to deny the other side. Just going to start from that position of you're wrong because you're on the wrong side. And my hope, and we'll talk about this moving forward, I guess, on the show, my hope is that China actually brings us together. I mean, if you have opposite sides. I mean, I saw NBC play a clip from Fox on their show because that's where Christopher Wray did the interview. I mean, why can't we that's to me an American value where we gather around the truth to better all citizens of this country. Forget about the tribe you belong to, because the people that don't like us are China. I promise you that. And we talked about that last week and the week before.
Yeah, I mean, I'm amazed at how the list keeps growing of all the individuals who were conspiracy theorists and nut jobs 3 years ago, and how they're looking pretty smart right about now. And so it kind of leads me to wonder, what else are those same conspiracy theorists being accused today of hyperventilating about that may be true, a year from now, right? That may actually be true now. I don't like the way people are dismissed on social media. I don't like the way the legacy media dismisses people that don't, sort of fall in line with the popular narrative. We need people to push back. We need people to ask questions, Karen. And we need an environment that fosters that. And I hope that if there's lots of takeaways from this, and we'll get into some of that, but I hope a big takeaway is that we need to create an environment where dissent is welcome, where informed pushback is welcome, not just noise. And I hope, that's American, right? I mean, we oughta get back to that. And if that can be encouraged as a result of this, man, I think there's a future. If not, God help us.
Yesterday I was thinking, okay, they're saying that COVID, they're not saying it did come from a lab, but at least they're mentioning that it could have come from a lab. But at the same time, you said maybe this will bring light to bring everybody on the same playing field, but wasn't it yesterday? And this is another story. Didn't PNC, like a bank, drop Donald Trump Jr. and said, sorry, you can't bank here anymore. There are so many ways that you can be canceled. And so, although this may feel good, But
it's a start, Karen. And so I want this seed. This is a seed, in my opinion, and it can grow, and it's a model. Look, I mean, Jon Stewart, even though I know he's left-leaning, he's kind of funny. He used to be funny, at least. But, I mean, he's pretty unapologetic, and he's militant about the whole... He does the whole skit. He was on Colbert. That video has been going around. I said, I mean, I love it. And, you know, it makes people uncomfortable. Bill Maher's been on this for a long time. And he's even getting, people say he's becoming more conservative and right. I think he's pretty consistent. He's just not crazy. And he's a comedian, even though he says things that are true. And I love when he gets serious because he doesn't mind calling out BS when he needs to call out BS. I mean, so we have to, the thing that bothered me the most, I mean, I'm sorry, the point you made earlier, I didn't want to interrupt you, was what George was alluding to is this censorship. We said this years ago. I said before anything else, 6-foot rule, where the hell did that come from? Vaccines, you know, people that had an opinion about that. Masks, Wuhan lab. You said these things before, and you were a nut job. Ivermectin, you know, hydroxychloroquine, whatever. Those were terms that made you were put in the cuckoo lounge. And now we see that there's credibility behind it. But the issue there, and the reason why I got to that, because nobody was allowed to talk. We said, I want you to share your ideas, Karen. Allow me to share my stupid-ass ideas. And then the court of public opinion and you sharing your good ideas will filter out my dumb idea. I promise you that. How do you know your idea is good unless you compare it to a bad one? And so we said this years ago that the thing that worried me the most was the fact that people were being censored and canceled, quote unquote. And now what do you do to that? Where's the accountability on the fact checkers, on the people that were canceled, on the people that were making the call to cancel? Because Fauci said for sure, I mean, Fauci should never be allowed to make a public statement ever again. His credibility is shot. Now, the people, I was talking to Patrick about this, you know, he's always a voice of reason and he's very tempered.
Your law partner.
Yes, Patrick in our office, double board certified, he's brilliant. And I like to hear his thoughts. I mean, and we were talking about it, you know, as a Christian, I'm a forgiving person. I believe in redemption. I believe in restoration. And the people that honestly, out of fear, because it was so much fear-mongering and ignorance meaning just not knowing, makes people afraid. Ignorance is not bliss. It's dangerous, right? And the people that were ignorantly, just not knowingly taken aside and were angry about it or fearful, that we should all reconcile around the truth and welcome, hey, look, let's just continue to pursue truth. But the people that were deliberate and intentional, that knew they were either covering up for pharma or covering up for some governmental move, or all the people that were defending China. How well are these China apologists out there? Now, all of a sudden, everybody's found permission to throw China over the boat. Now you have bipartisan support on holding China. I saw Director Brennan on MSNBC or one of the stations that I don't watch, that he was calling out, and I'm no fan of Director Brennan, you know, former CIA director, but he was calling out China. And he was talking about that we need to come together as a country to find out what kind of threat they are. I mean, I don't know. This is interesting to me, but I'm encouraged by it. I'm not saying that this is...
It'll be interesting to see, Nico, how much actually transfers to policy.
Agree.
You know, at this point, it almost seems like rhetoric is cheap. And I'm of the same opinion you are. I mean, you got to start somewhere. And it's nice to see that. I really would like to see it become real hard policy. The stuff that's going on is pretty dangerous stuff.
Yeah.
And it was obvious 3 years ago that the evidence, I think, was overwhelming. There's been papers that have been written to show that, in fact, you have this novel virus with all kinds of brand new properties. And they seem properties that are that have a peculiar affinity for human cell receptors, bat coronaviruses. And where's most of the bat coronavirus? And why bats? Because they're a natural reservoir of coronaviruses. So where are they traditionally studied? Usually in Asian territories. And there are at least 4 provinces near Wuhan where a lot of these reservoirs are tapped and specimens are gathered. So there was all kinds of real good sort of argumentation from the very beginning in favor of a lab leak theory. And they were coming from scientists. They weren't coming from
Karen.
Whack job.
Yes.
Oh, geez. You said Karen, I said whack job. We don't really mean
that. Was an accident.
We love
yeah,
Karen.
right, whatever. But
you're no whack job. You tolerate whack jobs every weekend. But
thanks.
So, Nico, what frustrates me is it was done in the name of science. So real science gave way to politicized science, right? The sort of intellectual curiosity to pursue what is actually true and usually what is true is very inconvenient, gave way to science-y talk. A few elements of the scientific, of a true, genuine pursuit of empirical truth, but there's actually a political agenda behind it. And you're right, man. This was a full court press, media personalities, legacy media. You had so-called scientists, and I say so-called because now upon investigation, you found that there's a lot of connection back to the United States government who was pushing this narrative that couldn't possibly have anything to do with lab leak theory. This emerged out of the wild. So there's lots of genetic evidence. Why does the Department of Energy revelation now, why does that matter? This is a shift, like Nico said, from their position. They're actually saying, yes, it's a likely thing. They're still calling it low confidence.
Right.
FBI is calling it moderate confidence. Why? They actually preside over more than a dozen national laboratories, a lot of them doing advanced biological research. So this matters.
In China?
No, nationally.
Okay.
And so for them to take this position, they're a lot late to the party. But I think we need to do what the FDA used to do. When they used to do sort of good manufacturing practice investigations at pharmaceutical companies, they used to sort of just get an overview of all the processes and systems and people, and then they'd find a bump and they just drill and drill and drill and drill and drill until they get, they sort of get to the root of the problem. And I think that's what needs to happen here. This needs to be a starting place. We need to drill further to see what is going on. And what is our connection exactly? How much money are we pumping into this kind of research? Does it have a civilian benefit, or is it a bioweapons initiative? These are serious questions we have to answer. I'm skeptical that we're gonna do any of that. I'm really worried about it.
My big question is, how will The View still blame Trump for coronavirus?
They'll find a way. Joyless Behar will find a way.
And why did Will Smith
slap Chris Rock during the act? That is our moral standard.
Because that's what really matters.
It's all coming up next on Sidebar. This is Sidebar, and if you don't know about it yet, we are on Facebook Live during the show, and if you want an easy way to get to the link, you go to sidebartv.com, and these days you can even become a supporter or a sponsor of the show. You can just look through the website and find out how to do that.
Did you notice that Kurt played Man Killer? Was that Man Killer?
Man Eater.
Was that Man
Eater?
What was that song, Kurt? Get on there, guys.
Small Town Lover? What is that?
Yeah, what was that?
Part-Time Lover.
Part-Time Lover.
Oh, okay.
That's it.
The songs, I always don't know the songs. Oh, before I forget, and the reason I wasn't paying attention is because I wanted to say hello to Mr. Larry Hicks. He listens to Sidebar, and I met him. He's the owner of Hicks Carpet One, Floor and Home, and I met him, and as soon as he walked in, he's like, Karen Klaus, you work with Nico LaHood and George. I was like, yeah. He's like, I love the show. So hello to Mr. Hicks.
Thank you, Ms. Hicks.
Absolutely.
Welcome, Larry. Welcome.
And so we were talking about what? We were talking about how everything is going to go back to being blamed on President Trump. And I know that that's a joke, sort of, but I just am not convinced that even with the Department of Energy and the FBI saying that there's a most likely cause that there was a lab leak, and that's how we got COVID. This is too complicated, and there's too many moving pieces to not have a reason why they just brought it up now.
You triggered my mind, and I don't want to go off on a rabbit trail. I'm sorry,
Yes,
but
please,
no.
please.
Well, we won't. But I want to make a point about Trump. I mean, this is what he should be focusing on: the fact that he continues to get vindicated over issues. Instead of attacking Ron DeSantis, who's not his opponent yet, which it looks like in every calculation he's going to run, he's lost weight, he looks great, he's doing interviews, his book's out there. I mean, I don't know if you've seen him. He looks lean and mean and ready to campaign, healthy. He's lost weight. I mean, he's interviewing great. I mean, I don't see how the guy doesn't run. I heard something that he's termed out. I guess they have term limits over there in Florida. Do you know that, George?
I don't know.
That's a Patrick question. I don't know, but I heard that, and so he has no choice but to run. I don't know, but it looks like. But my point being this is Trump has so much to talk about how he was right, about why they're coming after me because I'm protecting you. That whole slogan that he started for a while. He should be talking about those type of things. He's got a lot of talking points. Because his old style of 2015 and 16 of calling people names and coming up with a slogan for everybody, I don't think that's going to fly this time. And it seems like he started that out. I hope he changed his direction. I couldn't help but think that. about that, about what you were talking about Joy Reid and blaming Trump and all that other stuff. Your second point was what?
Well, it seems too easy. Like, this is another diversion, another topic that they're throwing in. Just like when they started going through all the high top profile, stuff that was in Biden's garage, like that topic's gone now too. So they have to bring up something else.
That's right. I'm sorry. I've lost track of thought for a second, but I don't want this to go away. Where's the discussion about why so many people were so wrong? George mentioned the narrative earlier. I mean, people were angry about it. People were canceled. People were called nuts. They were talking about people's credibility and their reputation. People need to repent for that. And I mean, not people like citizens. I mean, if you were wrong, it's sincerely wrong. I'm talking about people in media
That knew
the difference, especially in political circles.
People who should have known better.
Thank you.
Who should have withheld judgment and actually investigated the
100%.
situation. Here's Mehdi Hassan from MSNBC. The simple reason why so many people weren't keen to discuss the lab leak theory is because it was originally conflated by the right with Chinese bioweapon conspiracies and continues to be conflated by the right with anti-Fauci conspiracies. Blame the conspiracy theorists. Did you get that? So it's your fault.
I know.
But by default, aren't they not conspiracy theorists anymore?
No.
They were right.
No, not them.
Oh.
Not them. We're always by default conspiracy theory. Now, we might be right, but that's irrelevant because the truth is irrelevant.
Right.
Right. This is the point. We are in the wrong for pointing out that something smells fishy here. We're in the wrong. That's their default position. So guess what? We just talked about how are we going to learn from this. This doesn't seem like a really great first step towards learning from our mistakes. You can expect the future to look more and more like this. This is a serious, serious problem in national media. And it's not just them.
But the diversion, George, I heard someone say that used to work for President Obama saying, look, yeah, okay, it may come from a lab. Let's just move on. Let's move on and get ready for the next pandemic. I was like, what are you talking about? Next pandemic? I mean,
right. Right.
I would plant right there and cross-examine the hell out of him on that issue. But what do you mean move on? It's not about just, I don't want, look, again, I believe in forgiveness and redemption, but people that were intentional, I deal with mens rea for a living, right? Their intent. Was it negligent, criminally negligent, reckless, intentional, knowingly? I want to know why they did this. People need to be held accountable. And at the very least, they should not have a voice on influencing policy or how we respond to situations like this moving forward.
Doesn't it remind you, I'm sorry, George, doesn't it remind you, though? I mean, I always go back to the Benghazi hearings when Hillary Clinton said, what does it matter anymore? Yeah. And I keep on thinking and hearing that in my head for these situations. What does it matter anymore? We now know that this is the case, and now we can move forward, and nothing ever gets done.
We're not moving forward, and nothing is. I'm sorry, it just isn't happening. At least maybe it'll happen in policy, Nico. Maybe with regard to Republicans pushing for some sort of oversight policy that might change. Because right now, the whole system skirts federal oversight. This is how it all started. The NIH grants monies to organizations, research organizations. In this case, it was EcoHealth. You remember that? We talked about that a year ago. EcoHealth, under Peter Daszak, a researcher, had a sub-grantee at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. That's not acceptable. That violates grant terms. But because it wasn't NIH directly doing the research, they had awarded it to somebody who then awarded it to somebody. It was a few levels low on the radar. And it's been 20 years. If you go in the U.S. grant database right now, you're going to see dozens of grants over the years. I think it was about 20 years that have been granted to the Wuhan Institute of Virology, believe it or not. And what's interesting is that I think we still have about 13 of them that are active. I don't know that they're all Wuhan, but certainly EcoHealth. And so you might ask, has this stopped? And the answer is no. As of September 22, we're still granting millions of dollars to EcoHealth. I don't understand it. I really don't.
Well,
these are taxpayer dollars.
I mean, but when have we ever seen, George, where Republicans and Democrats have come together on this issue, on China at least? I mean, and again, I'm going to get back to the whole, I'm giving Trump unsolicited advice. He's been talking about China for 30 years. Whether you like Trump or not, he's been talking about China for 30 years. And so all I'm saying is I'm cautiously optimistic. This is something new. I mean, when you have a hearing, I didn't see all of it. I don't know if you guys watched it. I just saw a clip of it here and there. I mean, it didn't seem like a lot of childish bickering. It seemed very serious and poised. And it seemed, again, I didn't see the whole thing, so if someone can correct me, put a comment or whatever.
Yes.
It seemed like Republicans and Democrats were very, is that accurate, George?
In the Senate.
In the
Correct.
Senate, right.
Yes,
Okay, well, that's a start.
Yeah, we'll take
That's a big deal. We'll take it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think we do have that happening, thank goodness, in the Senate. I'm just curious. I'm curious to see where it's going to go because the money keeps flowing. Here we are, it's March of 23, and we have evidence of grant monies being given to EcoHealth as recently as September of 22. And look, we just talked about the EcoHealth, but it's not just them. It's not just the National Institute of Health that's giving the money. To the tune of like $40 million coming from the Department of Defense. $40 million to the Department of Defense to EcoHealth. Why? This is why. Is it conspiratorial to consider that there may be a bioweapons element to this? I don't think so.
I was just going to ask you, what would be the reason?
What's the civilian benefit to this? Look, they're not just manipulating a viral genome to see how it might replicate, okay, in a particular environment, let's say in mice. They're not just doing that. This is what they're doing is they're taking a number of coronavirus strains. They're creating what's called a chimera. It's a mixture of a virus with a mixture of various strains together. And then they're injecting it into a mouse, and that mouse has been injected with human receptor cells. Now, I don't think you need to be a microbiologist or a geneticist to figure out what's going on here. So they inject a mixed strain of coronavirus into a mouse. That mouse has human receptor cells. Those two connect, and what comes out is some other virus with conceivably more lethal elements, right? And with an affinity to attach itself to human receptors. So what could go wrong? And so we're wondering, how did this get leaked exactly? Wasn't you that you sent me a text, or maybe I sent you, I can't remember, but that interview between Tucker Carlson and Li Meng, who's a former Chinese virologist or Chinese scientist. I don't know if she's a virologist or microbiologist. And she has said she doesn't think the Chinese Communist Party deliberately released this into Wuhan from the lab. She thinks it was an accidental leak, as I understood it. But what's interesting is that China, and this is why I think it's nefarious, China controlled movement in Wuhan, but they allowed people to travel back and forth freely into Europe, particularly Italy. And I find that curious. And China will not allow any kind of investigatory activity at all into this.
Look, China's the only country that doesn't play nice with NATO, with anything else. Everybody, all these Green New Deal people want to limit our use of coal and energy and producing our own energy. And China's flipping them the middle finger. I don't know what their gesture is in China. Here it's, every country's got a little different gesture on how to tell someone to F off. And so China's doing that to everybody else. They're the only ones not playing by the rules. They're doing whatever they want. That's why I said last week, we're the LeBron James, the people that were the apologists sucking up to China because they're making money. All these justice, social justice warriors that the same things they're advocating, China's doing to a degree that's insane, but they're silent about China.
But I don't see. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, all I'm saying is China's the only one. They're making up their own rules, and nobody's holding them accountable. And so they're our biggest threat, even over Russia. I mean, I know that hurts the narrative for certain people on the left, but it's the truth.
But I don't see how it was China
You're right.
that brought up, it was bat stew that got spilled. That's American. That's an American thought. That can't be something that the Chinese came up with. It was bat soup. That's what started it. I remember everybody talking about that.
You watch too much Batman.
Sure. And it's not. Look, I mean, to be fair, Wuhan has a history of safety hazards and leaks.
Okay,
and lax control procedures. There's no question about that. And we have seen other viruses in the past that have been contracted that way, where the Chinese diet, let's say, it's not exactly plant-based strictly, right?
Is it bat-based? What are you talking about? Bat-based? Plant-based?
Eating bats and what was it? A pangolin?
Oh,
I believe it was a pangolin.
I remember that. Yes.
So that's not unusual, but you can study those things to see if, in fact, you can do evolutionary genetics allows you to see sort of these changes, these shifts in the genetic code. To see how these sort of genetic strands are changing over time, and you can kind of deduce from that whether in fact that comes from the wild, it's natural, or whether in fact it might have a manipulative signature to it. And what we've seen from the very beginning is enough evidence to conclude that this has in fact been manipulated. And I agree with Li Meng. It makes sense, right, that they wouldn't deliberately unleash it on their own people. It makes you wonder. But maybe, I don't know. But she said, no, I don't think they did it deliberately. I think it was an accidental. They underestimated the transmissibility, I think is what she said, of the virus. And this is what gain of function research does. They check to see whether they can create strains that are more transmissible, infectious, or whether they're more lethal.
But then why not restrict travel to other areas in the world?
And that
exactly
exactly right.
But they're not cooperating with any investigation.
And Trump was the nut job. Trump didn't know any of this stuff. But he just he instinctively said, we're going to limit travel from China. And what was he called?
Racist.
Yeah. Well, that's not a small point, Karen.
Yeah.
I mean, because the people that use that type of narrative, there needs to be accountability for that. At the very least, a little humility and apologize.
Please go to sidebartv.com if you want to watch the after show on Facebook Live, and we will be right back with more on Sidebar. I have a question. I'm going to ask both of you, but I just want to ask George before we continue with our conversation. Why do you think that this show is important? Why do you think Sidebar is something that people should tell their friends about, their neighbors about, so that they can find out about Sidebar?
I think we discuss issues that are perplexing the American mind right now, causing stress, dividing people. They're in the news. The legacy media covers in part, that conservative media covers better. But I think what we do is we bring a level of analysis that you're not going to see anywhere else. I think we have a way of spinning things and turning them around in ways, sort of, looking under the hood in a way that I think is novel and unique. And I think, as Nico always says, it's about teaching people to critically think, because I think we've lost the ability, frankly, unfortunately, to think rationally as an American people. And I think we bring that value.
Any comments?
Well, he hit my comment. To critically think. I mean, it's true. It's an exercise in critical thinking. I mean, to just go back and forth. I mean, look, we don't prepare for the show per se. I mean, we do our own lives. We text each other a little bit. We talk. We ask questions. I hope this shows people that it's okay to exercise your First Amendment right. I mean, it's the first for a reason. And so ask questions. There's nothing wrong with asking questions. I mean, I ask questions for a living. I cross-examine. I push back on people for a living. When the government comes in, or whether I was the government when I was DA or part of the government, or now as a defense attorney, back being a defense attorney, we push back on the other side's theory. You have a theory to a case. You're gonna push evidence. You're gonna present evidence to a jury. You're gonna argue to the judge why this evidence should be in and why that evidence should be out. I mean, you have to understand how to disagree. We don't know how to disagree in this country, and then you have to hate each other to disagree. What a stupid rule. I mean, that's just a crappy way to live life. You've got to learn to disagree, and then do what with it? Then live together still. What is our goal? And then this, I believe, this show. I mean, it didn't start this way, right, Karen? We joke about it.
Absolutely,
I know. We just started talking about legal issues. Like the old show 4 years ago would have been talking the whole time about Alex Murdaugh trial. And then it kind of just morphed into kind of current events, critically thinking, asking questions, pushing back. We brought George in to talk about PPE equipment.
We never got rid of him.
And he's like herpes. You can't get rid of him. And it's okay. We love it. So I hope people enjoy it. I hope people, think. And I hope people ultimately learn something and go, let me think about that. I disagree with them, but I appreciate the point of view. Or, you know what, I had no idea about that. Let me go research it myself. The bottom line is this: ignorance is not bliss. It's dangerous.
But I think we're multidisciplinary here, too. I mean, you bring a strong legal background. You've tried a ton of cases. That's pretty relevant to a lot of what we talk about. I came in to talk about PPE, but I mean, I bring up farm manufacturing and operations.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Which came in handy.
I'm just saying how you got in. I'm not saying that you only talk about that.
And it brings up all the stuff that we can understand.
No, you guys, hopefully, maybe you can. You can rein me in. But we get into science and religion because life's messy. I mean, all of these things inform, I think, good decision making. We try to do that in in fresh
And there's
ways.
nothing off
Hopefully we're
limits.
succeeding.
There's nothing. Look. I say this all the time when I speak. The advice I got growing up, Karen, and I'm sure you did too. 2 things you don't talk about in public is what?
Oh my gosh, I was just going to bring that up.
Religion and politics, right?
Just going to bring that up.
What a very foolish way to live life, to be honest with you.
We
That's a
violated that
safe way.
advice.
I guess that's safe. Now, religion is just your worldview. That's what it means. How do you see the world? What's the lens? That's all it means to me. I'm not a religious person. I'm a faithful person. I'm a passionate, unapologetic follower of Jesus Christ. I like to be true to the gospel. I believe it's authoritative. I can defend it. We can debate it. And that's why we do R-Rated Christianity, that Thursday night podcast. But that's what religion means. What's your worldview? And then your politics just means what? What are you advocating? We've dissected, George and I on the other show before. The politics comes from the root word polity, a set of ideas advocated by a group of people to affect the affairs of a city. That's it, or affairs of your community. That's politics. You have politics in your church. You have politics in your office. You have politics in your whatever group you're in. You have politics in your home. A set of ideas advocated by a group of people to affect the affairs of the community. And so we need to talk about what you're advocating and what you believe. How are we going to be good neighbors if I don't know that? And we should be able to learn to discuss that properly and professionally.
A deeply Christian and a deeply American ideal. You know, the idea of doing something important out of your convictions, out of your religious convictions. You know, you believe that God exists, and one day we're going to stand before Him and give an account. There was a time when politicians actually used to believe that, and so
it held them accountable.
That's exactly.
It held them accountable.
Yeah, exactly right.
We talk about critical thinking and how it is just gone. It's gone in education and pretty much in our politics today. But no words, and when you have no comment, in my view, is a comment. When you have nothing to say about something, you turn your back and you go the other way. And that reminds me of just a couple of days ago when President Biden was asked about where did COVID come from? He stood there for a second. You could see his tiny little brain. I mean, him thinking.
His tiny little brain. Nothing personal, Karen.
And then he turned away and shuffled off.
Well, he threw his arms up. I thought that was non-presidential. First, number one, I think it was cowardice and disrespectful. It was, it was everything. Whatever adjective you want to use or whatever word you want to use to describe it. I mean, but again, for whether you like him or not, and this is not. Look, I've criticized Trump on the show many times before. This is not an advertisement for him, but I'm just a truth seeker. You got to call it the way it is. And Ron DeSantis does the same thing, by the way. For all his flaws, Trump did interviews himself. He set himself up because he can't control his mouth, and he loves the spotlight. And that's good and bad, right? And then he's in there. He's talking to everybody, talking off the cuff. And then Biden, he's not talking off the cuff. They pull him away. He doesn't know where he's at. He's shaking, shuffling. It's really embarrassing for him. It's embarrassing for this country. But that was disrespectful, and I thought that was cowardice. He should have stood there. He should have taken the tough questions. Your name's on the plaque, Jack. You're the one that wanted this position. You've been in politics for 50 years. You were vice president, and now you are the president of the United States. Act like it. And that right there, that guy's embarrassment.
He looked irritated. And what was the question? On COVID origin, will you hold China accountable? And he puts both his hands up, kind of shrugs his shoulders, looks annoyed, and walks away. So I thought to myself, this dude has problems holding himself accountable, much less China accountable. Yeah. But that's an important question. Nico's right. That really should have been, that should have landed him for 10 minutes right there, just talking about that topic. Again, we're not saying that China deliberately did this. It certainly wouldn't surprise me, but we're not saying there's no evidence that they deliberately did this. But look, we've talked about it, I think, last week and the week before. Look at what China said at the very onset of this stuff. In January of 2020, they said there's absolutely no evidence whatsoever of human-to-human transmission. Yeah. And of course, the World Health Organization just sort of parroted the same line. And to this day, China refuses to let investigators in there and do a thorough investigation of it. In fact, they've allowed World Health Organization and some American delegates that are part of the World Health Organization to go there, but they're furnished with a completed report by the Chinese Communist Party, which already has conclusions developed, which means it's not an investigation.
There's the same China party that said, that balloon that's flying over all your country, that's a weather balloon, went out of control. What the hell are you talking about?
Totally legitimate question that he blew off. Yep.
But all I'm saying is these people, this country has no credibility. Anyone that would believe or defend China, it loses credibility, to include celebrities, media, Hollywood, whomever.
take a minute to put your seatbelts on because I'm going to take a sharp turn here. Alex Murdaugh has sentenced yesterday to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the murders of his wife and his son.
Two life sentences.
Oh, yes. So, Nico, you weren't surprised.
No. I said it. He was going to, remember I told you.
The video.
I said and I was on, Joe Pags had me on last night very graciously, and he mentioned the show. He didn't say sidebar, but he mentioned the show. I appreciate it.
That was a good interview.
He's just a little jealous, that's all.
People need to check out that interview.
Oh, yeah, that is good.
Well, thank you. But so, I mean, I was saying this before. I said, at the best, this is going to be a hung jury. At best, you know, and it's interesting to find out that when they first started deliberations, it was 2 for not guilty, 1 I'm not sure, and the rest of them were guilty immediately. I thought from early on, and I didn't have 6 weeks to watch the whole trial, so I was really playing catch-up depending on the interview or the questions that were being asked. But the video that showed him at the kennel, not showed him, that you could hear him at the kennel. This is that lawyer, for those that don't know, I mean, I don't know how you don't know, there's a Netflix video on it now, film on it. It's gotten global attention, national attention for sure. His family for 100 years had been involved in the justice system there in South Carolina.
That's right.
In South Carolina, Murdaugh. His great-grandfather was a district attorney. His grandfather, I believe, was a district attorney. He was an assistant DA, I believe, or prosecutor for some period of time. He was heavily influential. It was a very high-profile family there. And talk about a fall from grace. And this guy was accused of murdering his wife and he's convicted now, and his son, one of his sons, Paul. Now, there's a lot backstory to that where he was, I mean, it came out that he's taken money, millions of dollars from his firm, from his clients. He has a dependency on opioids and drugs that for 10 years, I mean, and this guy is a very, very good litigator, and he's a very, very good liar and lied to many, many people. So all that as a background, it captivated the country. People were fascinated how this family could present, and I deal with this for a living. People that present a certain way, but behind the scenes, man, there's this secret life. I say this all the time, Karen, with politics and from pastors. I always say you're entitled to a private life. You're not entitled to a secret life. I don't want to see you go to the bathroom or be intimate with your wife or pick your nose, but you shouldn't have a life that you're embarrassed of or that you don't want other people to know about. And that's a secret life. This guy had a secret life and had demons, obviously. So the video that his son Paul, they were down at the kennel minutes, and this was an interesting case for study in the future on how to put evidence together, how to take very strong circumstantial evidence, make it almost direct evidence, and prosecute a case. I thought the government did a very good job prosecuting. Forget about the criticism on their styles or whatever. I can talk about that if you want to. But the video where Paul was at the kennel with his mom minutes before they were murdered. And remember, Alec Murdaugh had said, I wasn't even there. We had dinner.
For 20 months, he denied.
But multiple times.
Right.
To his closest friends and to interviewers and detectives over and over again. And then they finally, the Secret Service unlocked the phone. They didn't realize.
A year later.
Paul, sorry, he passed. Alec didn't know, the defendant didn't know that video was there.
Correct.
And then it was there, and then all of a sudden, he had to change his story. And I said this to Joe, to Pags last night, and to other people. He had to testify. There was, at that point, he had to testify. There's 2 reasons that made him testify. When the judge made that pretrial ruling that all his financial crimes and allegations were going to come in, that was going to be an uphill battle. That was going to be very challenging. And then when that video came in, that his voice was in the background, you could clearly hear his voice. He had no choice to testify. And it was his downfall because he testified horribly, in my opinion. He performed well, but his logic was bad.
There's some outstanding issues. I hope we can touch on those when we come back. And you'll be hearing more of Sidebar. WOAI, please join us after the show. You can find the link at sidebartv.com. There's so many questions I want to ask about this.
You love this stuff, Karen. You're texting
I do. And somebody even said online, why is this case so important? Does it affect me in San Antonio? Well, probably not. To me, I was interested because I'm so bitter. I always think that the rich guy is going to get off with murder. It's just like a movie. It's entertaining to me because I like to see the back and forth arguments. Because in my mind, at a trial, it is a performance. It is a show, and it is so interesting to see the persuasion that happens. But when you
but the justice system, we have one in San Antonio. It's very similar to South Carolina. So I don't know who made that comment, but I would venture to say that anything that person sees or watches doesn't deal with their life personally. I mean, you understand my point, but there's a lot of things to glean from this. I mean, there's spiritual, emotional, psychological, societal, legal. I mean, there's a lot to glean from this, from this fall from grace, from this family and what they were doing there. But for me, I was fascinated by the legal. I mean, all these legal shows, crime and punishment shows are interesting to people because every community has a justice system. And think about what the justice system is. Have you thought about it? Maybe not. The justice system is our standard of morality. When you think about it, it's the social experiment. It's a social experiment also because you're dealing with people, but it's a testing of ideas. It's our standard for morality. Don't steal my crap because it's not yours. Says who? Says the justice system, but there's an idea behind that. You can't take something that's not yours. Don't touch me without permission. Don't punch me. Don't take my life. Don't assault this. Don't talk bad about me. Don't try to steal my business. That's our moral compass. Our justice system, our laws are the agreed moral compass. And that's why when you talk about the George Soros district attorneys and the changing of the justice system and how George Soros, that might affect someone's life, has influenced even the DA here. He's a George Soros DA. And all the other from Baltimore to San Francisco to LA to New York to Atlanta, Georgia, to all these areas, to Chicago, where all these Soros-backed DAs have brought a different idea of justice to their community. The justice system interests people because everyone knows someone that's been through the system. So this case was fascinating for a lot of reasons, because of the family, because of the justice system, because the idea, how could somebody who has no history of family violence, was a pillar at one point and then was starting to unravel at the end, brutally murder his wife. I mean, think about that. I mean, you have a video of him at the kennel and you hear him in the background saying, "Hey, Bubba, get that chicken out of your mouth." I mean, and that would have been part of my defense, by the way, if he would have been honest about it from the beginning. How can a guy go from that to blowing his son's brains out, to having two guns? I mean, they don't need to prove premeditation or motive, by the way, but that became an issue. And then shooting his wife 5 times with a 300 blackout.
Well,
I mean, that captivated people.
I always bring up my dad because I always talk to him about everything, current events and trials, because he gets to watch all day, and it makes me so mad. I always get the highlights from him, but he was like, it wouldn't surprise him, my dad said this, if somebody wanted to get revenge on Alex Murdaugh for stealing, for getting away with killing his son, getting away with his daughter, because it's such a twisted case, and it's not over yet because there's so many outstanding issues, right? Like the financial part.
I was going to make a comment and turn it into a question because it's the question I have. I mentioned to you during the break that I've been following what Alan Wilson has been saying. He's the South Carolina Attorney General, which you said you really respect the fact that he's been there, right? He hasn't just sort of visited here and there. He's actually been there consistently through this trial. What fascinates me about him is that he's brought up the issues that you have, Nico. And he says that he thinks the Snapchat video is ultimately what did it, what sort of sunk Alex Murdaugh. And there are jurors that have gone on network interviews that have said that too. Man, I was on the fence. Yeah. And then when that video placed him there minutes, like 5 minutes before this happened, I mean, it seemed to me a no-brainer, they said. And he denied that for, like I said, 20 months, and then he finally had to deal with it. That's why I think you said he had to testify.
Gotcha.
Now, it's interesting because Alan Wilson said he thinks that their greatest evidence, the state's greatest evidence, was Alex Murdaugh. He says they got him on the stand. He goes, I don't think he should have testified. Because when he got on the stand, that dude was so used to lying, he couldn't even decipher the truth from lie. He just couldn't tell the difference anymore. And he said that he thought that kind of did him in. And he says as a prosecutor, I don't think he should have testified, but we were glad he did because you could see so many inconsistent statements, and we just drilled him.
But he had no choice.
But you said he had to testify.
He had no choice because he lied so much. Video. If he wouldn't have lied about it, it's a completely different investigation. If that video is not found, I think we have a hung jury. Even though you have circumstantial, people don't want to make that leap. He said, why didn't they seek the death penalty? Because there's a death penalty statute there, and you murder 2 people in the same incident scheme, the motive scheme. Then you can have the death penalty.
Yeah, that's right.
But it was still circumstantial. It wasn't direct evidence. He had no choice but to testify. There's no doubt about that. And that sunk him. So here's the deal. People criticize Waters. Waters was the lead prosecutor. The case kind of a little dry on his style, but and they were criticizing him because he was not asking enough leading questions. And I thought it was interesting. Here's a guy, because there's a lot of strategy to trial work, who knew his opponent. He knew Alec Murdaugh very well. He had listened to interviews. He had listened to him talk before. Maybe saw him litigate a case before. He knew this guy was he's a narcissist, an evil narcissist, but was a narcissist and couldn't help himself. He said, I let him. I purposely asked open-ended questions because I knew he couldn't help himself, that he was going to talk himself into, and he was right. That was his strategy, which made sense because people couldn't understand why he wasn't redirecting him and leading him more and not letting him but he was looking at people, all that fake crime, and I read something that someone thought he was fake crying. People cry differently, and I mean, there's ugly criers.
He was an ugly crier.
Yeah, whatever. I mean, I don't know what that means. I mean, I hear that all the time, but I've seen way too many people cry.
I listened a little bit more to Wilson. He's kind of a philosopher to me. I pulled up this quote I thought was kind of, he said, quote, "You have a family legacy that is over 100 years old. You have a man that has lived a lifestyle of privilege in a world that many of us will never know. And all of that was going to end eventually," he said. And he was getting desperate. Yeah. He was in survivor mode at this point. And then before the judge, I think was it Judge Newman? Mm-hmm. He said, "Look, I respect this court." This is Alex Murdaugh saying, "I respect this court, but I am innocent." And then Newman says, "Well, maybe you are, but the monster in you isn't." And then he went on and talked about his opioid addiction. Yeah. When you've got 15, 20, 30, whatever, when you're under that kind of influence, when you have erratic behavior, when you have paranoid delusions, yes, and you throw in this desperation, you've got a century-old legacy that's going to end, and it's going to end on your watch, right? And he says, "Look, you and this monster might be different, but you're the same individual." Did
you see his response or reaction when they read the verdicts and they read the sentencing?
Not much of a reaction.
It almost seemed like he was ready.
Oh yeah, he knew.
He knew.
The defense counsel knew. Buster or whatever. I mean, they knew. I mean, the guy. That's not a normal to me. When someone said, "Gosh, I just got convicted of wrongfully murdering my wife and blowing my son's brains out," that would not be the reaction or the response that I would have expected, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Now he faces, 99 charges.
He's going to go out.
Is it 2 consecutive life sentences and then 2 other charges for what? Illegal possession of a weapon?
Yeah, it's a statute that's specific to South Carolina. I mean, I'm sure they run them concurrent, but those are consecutive. He's not. He's going to meet the Lord from prison.
But he also, I mean, this isn't over because now he faces all of those charges.
Financial crimes.
Financial, like stealing $9 million from one client.
Partners and clients.
Didn't he even coordinate with the family of his housekeeper after she mysteriously died on the steps of their house.
And then collect $4 million.
To sue himself, got the financial
gain. Didn't give it
gain.
to the kids. I mean, this guy's a piece of dog, whatever, you know what I mean? I mean, he's unbelievably reprobate because there's no repentance in him. He's got a seared conscience. I mean, he was in survival mode. I thought the Attorney General's assessment was valid because you get into the psyche. You have to understand who you're prosecuting and what. You don't have to They didn't have to prove motive, but they were talking about motive the whole time because it's hard for jurors to get their head around that somebody with no history of this could do something like that. And was such. And you guys didn't. I mean, the public didn't see the murder scene, but it was brutal.
Oh my gosh, I didn't see that.
Horrid.
It was brutal, absolutely brutal.
So it continues. I mean, it's
going to
not
appeal.
Gonna be, yeah,
there's going to appeal. Somehow it's China's fault, I'm sure.
No, Trump's fault.
I was still dwelling on Nico. He was waxing eloquent here on philosophy a little bit about the purpose of the legal system. I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. It's this sort of agreed upon moral compact, if you will, and it forces individuals to reckon with the truth. And I just reflected on how a lot of this show talks about how there's this constant cultural evasion of the truth. From students in high school who are taught to run away from it and subjectify truth. Truth is whatever you feel it's to be. To the President of the United States, right? Who calls blue red and green yellow. So we have this cultural, almost we're sort of at war with this concept of the truth, and it caused me to reflect. The justice system, Nico, forces us to reckon with facts.
I love that you use the word reckon, by the way.
It's, the day of reckoning has come upon us, if you will. So Alex Murdaugh, and I think, I don't know, I think he kind of represents, it's not just, hey, the truth has come for you, but then I think there's a part of us, because never underestimate a human being's willingness to subvert and to obfuscate and run from the truth. And I think people wondered, is he going to be able to get away from, is this going to be another OJ moment? And I think we're
OJ thought he was going to get acquitted, by the way.
I think, yeah. I mean, I watched it, but I was glued to 1994. I remember watching that from that Bronco on to the courtroom. I watched it, and I think people are fascinated by that. There's so many examples of people in positions of authority getting away with murder, if you will, that, no pun intended here. That I think people wondered, is this going to happen here?
That's why I always come back over time to, would this idea be good in the justice system? The idea of censoring, the idea of pushing back, the idea of questioning, the idea of coming up with a salacious theory. Look, their theory was it could have been someone trying to murder Paul for that boat accident because he took a lot of death threats. And look, that's a valid theory. You have to be able to present that to a jury. Then they had a theory of what could have been two shooters and from a distance. And then they looked at the GSR and they had gunshot residue and they put evidence together. They pinged phones. I mean, this is a great case study. But they had the right to present. And guess what? In the court, not of public opinion, but in a court of law, people came together. They reasoned. They used logic, common sense, and they listened to both debates and they came up with a conclusion. We have got to take that model and allow it to be the model for society to disagree, guys. Look, join us for the after show. We're going to be on for another 30 minutes or so talking about current events. If you enjoy this, please share this show with anyone, or what am I looking at? Someone that you might enjoy it, and hopefully we'll see you, God willing,